What's going on? This is Theo Greminger, aka the OG Fantasy, back at it. Week 5 waiver wire. This week was wild week. Highly recommend you check out my fantasy takeaways video. You can find it right here, right on Player Profiler YouTube. Should be right around where you're watching this waiver wire video. I break down my biggest takeaways for the week. Also, highly recommend you check out my episode of First Class Fantasy with Billy Muzio and our guest, Davis Maddock. We talked a lot about Sunday's action, but we're back at it. It's week 5. We've got a whole month sample size for these players. 1 month sample size is a lot more important than the entire offseason. We know what coaching staffs think of these players. We know some young players who are starting to pop and develop roles within their offenses. And we know the players that are really struggling in the situations where we want to avoid. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest adjustments fantasy managers need to make is it doesn't matter if you drafted that player this summer as a starter. If you're not liking what you're seeing and the usage looks bad and the team looks bad, get that player on your bench, get somebody in there that can help you win games now. You can always go back to these guys later in the year, but don't get stuck because of some sunken cost. This week, we've got to really adjust with the bye weeks. Just a quick reminder, this week, Cleveland, bye week. If you've been using Amari Cooper, get ready to pivot. The LA Chargers, this one stings a lot. No Keenan Allen for you this week. No Justin Herbert for you this week. And the positive is you should have another week for Austin Eckler to get himself healthy. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this has been a sneaky source of some fantasy value. Mike Evans dealing with a hamstring injury. This is good for his managers. You get him to potentially get healthy. Chris Godwin had a nice game last week. Baker Mayfield up to like quarterback 15 on the season. Wild times. Seattle, you saw them dominate the New York Giants last night. No DK Metcalf for you this week. No Tyler Lockett. And no Ken Walker. Going to have to adjust off of that one. And then we got to get ready for week 6. Week 6 is simple. Green Bay and Pittsburgh, only 2 weeks on bye. And then week 7, this is the ugly one where you've got to really prepare. You have 6 teams on bye in week 7. I'll say that again. 6 teams on bye in week 7. Carolina, Cincinnati, Dallas, Houston, the New York Jets, and the Tennessee Titans. Wild times for week 6. Week 6 is the one where we're really going to have to get ready. If you've been following my waiver wire column, drops every single Tuesday on playerprofiler.com, or you've been following these videos, you know that I want you to get at least 1 week ahead on waivers. So maybe this week, if you have, let's say, a kicker that you've been using and he's got a week 6 bye, consider just pivoting off this week. That way you don't have to worry about it at all. If you have a quarterback and you've been, potentially rostering only one quarterback, you need to be able to prepare. My Justin Herbert teams, I was able to pick up some CJ Stroud, so I'm able to make that simple switch. But a lot of times you don't have that luxury. So be prepared. I'm going to go a little deeper at the quarterback position with my waiver wire recommendations today, knowing that people have to get through these disgusting bye weeks. Anyway, let's start at that quarterback position. And again, every player I'm listing here is available in 75% of Yahoo leagues or more. This is not a shallow league waiver wire show, but I'm going to list some shallow league ads. And the first one I'm going to list would be my number 1 waiver wire ad if he's available in any of your leagues. And it's shocking, he's still available in 53% of Yahoo leagues. So don't get at me, guys. I don't need to hear the "not in my league, bro." Of course he's rostered, and I realize he is rostered in most leagues. But CJ Stroud is still available in 53% of Yahoo leagues. If he's still available to you in your league, make it rain. CJ Stroud is the real deal. He's had 2 touchdown passes in 3 consecutive games. The Houston Texans are winning. They dominate the Pittsburgh Steelers start to finish. I think they have an excellent offensive coordinator. They have a really strong organization right now with D'Amico Ryans and Slowick. Some very smart minds in that building. And CJ Stroud looks poised beyond his years. I think he's the real deal. I think he's a top 10 dynasty quarterback. I think he's a top 12 quarterback this year. I think you treat him as a streamer rest of the season. You're going to like what you see from CJ Stroud. Tricky game against Atlanta this week, but I think he'll rise to the task. Sam Howell is back on our radar. He's available in 82% of Yahoo leagues. Right now, Sam Howell is quarterback 17 on the season, but if you kind of want to take away that Buffalo game, he's closer to QB1. The Buffalo game was just awful. 1 week ago, gets sacked 9 times, tosses away some bad interceptions, looks terrible. Washington gets dominated by Buffalo. Then you have to like the fact that Howell is able to rebound, go into Philly, and nearly pull off an upset. They ended up losing the game in overtime, but Howell was not the reason. He passed for 290 yards, and he also added a season-high 40 rushing yards. This was always a part of Howell's game that he had in his final season at North Carolina, some decent rushing production. You finally saw it this year. This was impressive. He's got a great matchup against Chicago this week. Chicago is reeling. That they are not a very good football team right now. An 0-4 Chicago team comes into Washington. This is if you have a Justin Herbert, if you're looking for a quarterback that might be on your waiver wire, it's Sam Howell. And if you're trying to get ahead of a week 6 bye, take a look at Baker Mayfield. I know, guys, Baker Mayfield, yeah, that's funny, Theo. No, Baker Mayfield's quarterback 14 overall in the season. The Bucs are 3-1, and Baker Mayfield has some momentum. What's most interesting about Mayfield is the box scores are not showing it in terms of the fantasy points, but he has 23 rushing attempts on the season. Underrated aspect of his game. Passing wise, he had 3 touchdown passes in week 4's win over New Orleans. Huge win. Anytime Tampa Bay beats New Orleans, it's a big win for them, and vice versa. Big rivalry game. So Baker is looking good. His only loss is to the Philadelphia Eagles. Tampa Bay is feeling really good about where they're at right now. And then another quarterback to keep in mind is Joshua Dobbs. This one is weird. Again, Joshua Dobbs, before the season, I didn't think I'd ever be talking about him on a waiver wire article or show, but he's in my waiver wire article. I have to talk about him here. Quarterback 16 on the year. He's had 3 games with 40 or more rushing yards, and he has a surprisingly solid set of wide receivers. You know, nobody was talking about the weapons in Arizona, but they've kind of been maximized. Hollywood Brown looks good. Zach Ertz looks good. Michael Wilson looks good. James Conner in the backfield. There's some decent things about this Arizona team. They're not a very good football team, but they are competing, and they beat Dallas in week 3. And I think that they're going to go really hard at Cincinnati this week. I think they're a live dog against those Bengals. If you're in a real pinch, consider Josh Dobbs. And Superflex leagues, Josh Dobbs and Mayfield should be starting every week in Superflex right now. Another quarterback that you can consider in Superflex this week is Zach Wilson. He's a matchup-based Superflex streamer this week against Denver. Denver has been abysmal. You saw Justin Fields pass for a career-high touchdowns with 4, a career-high in yardage, over 300 yards passing against this Denver secondary. Zach Wilson, listen, it's Zach Wilson, but I have to say this was the best I ever saw Zach Wilson look as a professional. They went right at Kansas City. He made some very tough throws. They seem to be opening things up for him, and he rose to the task. And it doesn't hurt when you're able to target Garrett Wilson 14 times. We love seeing that. So I think that's going to be Zach Wilson connecting with Garrett Wilson a lot this week against Denver. He is a sneaky bet for top 15 production. Running back wise, let's stay in Denver. Javonte Williams exited week 4's come from behind win against Chicago with a hip injury. The team has told everybody that this isn't a big deal. He'll be back. But we've seen Javonte Williams miss some time in the past. Jaleel McLaughlin was really, really good. This is an undrafted free agent, was a mega producer at Youngstown State. Youngstown State, a big-time FCS program, but still a small school, relatively speaking. McLaughlin rushed for 72 yards on 7 carries, and he added 3 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. He's a smaller back. I think this is what he is. He's a guy that's going to do it with his receiving work and his rushing work combined if he's going to be a productive fantasy player. And on the season, he's looked much more explosive than either Williams or Samaje Perine. He's averaged 7.1 yards per carry to only 3.6 or 3.7 for those other 2 guys. So I think at the very least, he's earned a very big weekly role. And at the best chance scenario would be he overtakes this backfield and becomes an RB2. I don't think either thing is out of the question. More likely than not, it's a running back by committee. That's kind of Sean Payton's preference, but Sean Payton needs wins. This is not going so well for him this year, and Jaleel McLaughlin was a big part of their only win of the season. So I think a little bit of self scouting is this kid has a little bit of juice to him. Let's get him the ball and let's see where this thing goes. If he has another big week this week, then I don't know. We'll see. The Jets defense is tough, but again, McLaughlin can do it as a receiver as well as a rusher. And he's a very explosive player that can break off a couple of big gains here and there. So I'm prioritizing McLaughlin as a top 3 waiver wire ad, no matter what your format, no matter what the depth of your league is this year, just because there's a little bit of an unknown. I also think that he's not a guy that's going to completely break the bank. I think you're talking about a guy that's going to be like a 30% in an FFPC or NFFC type league, not a 50% type guy. So he's definitely worth a shot, especially if you're struggling at the running back position. Another running back to consider is Chuba Hubbard. He's available in 75% of Yahoo leagues. Miles Sanders, we talked about it last week, dealing with pec and groin injuries. Hubbard outsnapped him this week. He outrushed him 41-19. Neither one was good. I mean, it's really hard to watch Carolina play offense right now. But Chuba Hubbard is capable of taking on a much larger role, especially if Sanders was to miss time. I think that box score watchers might let this one slip through the crack because, again, the guy only had 41 yards rushing. But if you look at the snap shares, it's actually Hubbard who was on the field more. So I think Sanders might actually be breaking down. Again, you don't want to see a guy dealing with multiple injuries. And Hubbard, I think if Sanders were to miss some time, he'd be a guy you could easily slide into your flex or potentially your RB2 if you're really hurting. Tyjae Spears, I have to mention him every week because he's still available in 76% of Yahoo leagues. Derrick Henry had a Derrick Henry smash game. I decided to come at the king last week and say that maybe he was regressing. The old saying, shout out to the wire, if you come at the king, you best not miss. And I certainly missed. Derrick Henry made me look foolish. 122 yards rushing, a touchdown, passes for a touchdown. But even with Derrick Henry smashing, Tyjae Spears still has a solid game. He had 18 yards receiving, and he added 40 yards rushing. He had 3 catches. This is kind of a weekly thing where Tyjae Spears sees like 4 targets every single week now. He'll catch a couple of them. I think he's heading towards handcuff plus territory if Tennessee can improve as an offense. Or if you don't want to look at him like that, he's one of the better handcuffs in the league based on his two-way ability, his talent, and the fact that they would have to lean on him heavily if Derrick Henry were to miss some time. I think if Derrick Henry were to miss, Tyjae Spears would end up being like running back 15, 16 on the week, and he would definitely be in our starting lineups. Shallow leagues. Elijah Mitchell might get dropped this week. He missed last week in San Francisco's win over Arizona. I think the biggest takeaway is San Francisco doesn't want to use Jordan Mason. They had plenty of opportunities to use a second back, and they kept going back to Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey had 3 touchdown runs. He caught another one. He was sensational. McCaffrey's averaging 30 points per game this year. But if he were to miss time, Elijah Mitchell would be like a top 15 play. Mitchell had his best game of the season in week 3. Again, misses week 4 with a knee injury. I don't think he's too injured. This is not like a send him to the IR type situation. So again, if he gets dropped in your leagues, consider picking up Elijah Mitchell. Treat him as a high-end handcuff. Speaking of handcuffs, Tank Bigsby is now falling to a level where we can add him for cheap. He's available in 75% of Yahoo leagues. Very slow start to the season for Bigsby. This was a trendy guy in the summer. We thought that he was going to have an increased role in this offense. Day 2 pick out of Auburn. Flashed in the preseason. Failing to live up to expectations. He's actually played behind Dearness Johnson at times. That being said, I still think that if ETN were to miss time, I think Bigsby would see a very large role in Jacksonville's offense. Just pick him up as a handcuff. Keaton Mitchell, he comes off IR this week. Keaton Mitchell's funny. Billy Muzio and I have talked about him on our podcasts a number of times, and now I think people are starting to catch up to it. He's actually rostered in 17% of Yahoo leagues, but he's still obviously available in 83% of them. This is a situation where Mitchell looked good in the preseason. averages like 6 yards a carry in the preseason, gets hurt, but he's a 4.37 40 guy. He's really, really, really fast and explosive, smaller back, dynamic. And right now, his only competition would be Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. Melvin Gordon's not a thing. The Ravens self-scout about as well as anyone in football. If you recall, like Gus Edwards coming out of nowhere and just getting handed the reins to the offense as an undrafted free agent out of Rutgers a few years ago, that could be the case with Mitchell. This is a very good offense. I don't think they want to be limited by their running backs, and I think Keaton Mitchell gives them the opportunity to not only use him in the passing game, but he can be used on explosive long runs, maybe more so than we're seeing capable from Justice Hill and Gus Edwards right now. I'm very intrigued by Keaton Mitchell. I have him in my top 10 waiver wire ads this week. Another shallow league ad, Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson's available in I believe he's available in 83%, he's available in 73% of Yahoo leagues. If Raheem Mostert or Devon Achane were to miss some time, Jeff Wilson would be a thing. This is a stash for you on your bench. We want to have Miami Dolphins when available. Ronnie Rivers. Didn't think I'd be speaking about Ronnie Rivers. A lot of people, including myself, have been recommending Zach Evans as a running back to roster in LA, taking over as a handcuff role behind Kyron Williams. But it's not Zach Evans. It's Ronnie Rivers. Ronnie Rivers had a career high of 47 yards and caught 2 passes this week in LA's win over Indianapolis. He's the handcuff right now to Kyron Williams. Again, Ronnie Rivers, if you want to stash as many handcuffs as possible, it's Ronnie Rivers. Here's a situation to monitor. Rico Dowdle would be an ad if he's healthy. Right now, Dowdle suffered a hip injury. We don't know how serious it is. We'll find out more this week. If Rico Dowdle has anything significant, then Deuce Vaughn becomes an ad. Deuce Vaughn is available in like 94% of Yahoo leagues. He had 8 carries this past week. Didn't do anything with them, but Vaughn is a two-way ability running back. He's very small. He could not handle a ton of volume, but I do think if Pollard were to miss time and there was no Dowdle, Vaughn would be like a high-end RB3 flex type because I think he would see the receiving work. He would have some high-value touches out of the backfield. And the player to keep an eye on is Malik Davis if Rico Dowdle is injured. Malik Davis, again, was kind of an afterthought, beat out by Rico Dowdle. I'm not especially excited about him, but again, this Dallas offense is solid, and we want to have these kind of lottery tickets on our benches. So it would go Vaughn as my preferred ad, Malik Davis as like a $0 fab ad and this is if Dowdle is hurt. Zamir White, just a reminder, Zamir White is the handcuff in Vegas. You can get him for $1. You can get him for $0 in some leagues. If you're stashing handcuffs, Zamir White is the next man in if anything were to happen to Josh Jacobs. Pierre Strong, super interesting. Cleveland was dominated start to finish. Baltimore won 28-3. Strong got his work in the fourth quarter, but he's the most explosive back in Cleveland right now. Rushed for 49 yards on only 5 carries. Far more productive on the ground than Jerome Ford or Kareem Hunt. Those guys combined for 38 yards. This was Hunt's kind of first action since returning to Cleveland. Ford has a locked-in role as a receiver, but I still think Cleveland's kind of figuring things out. And Strong, especially with the bye week coming up, Strong could start getting more work in the second half of the season. Wide receivers, my favorite ad this week, Michael Wilson. Senior Bowl standout, quickly rose up draft boards. Zona selects him in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. Played very well in the preseason, and his role has been growing. In week 3, he caught 2 balls for 86 yards, and then this past week goes nuts. 7 targets, catches all 7 of them, has 2 touchdown receptions against the 49ers, 76 receiving yards. He is a big, strong, physical wide receiver, 6'2", 215, very much looks the part. And I think that his role is growing. He's one of my favorite waiver wire ads this week. Hollywood Brown and Zach Ertz and Michael Wilson. That's kind of the target pecking order in Arizona. Rondell Moore is a guy that I was a little bit excited for last week. Big letdown usage this week, but we're just adjusting. It's Michael Wilson. This has been a great year for 3rd round wide receivers. Tank Dell has been a guy I've talked about. Hopefully you have him rostered. Josh Downs, we're going to talk about him in a second, and Michael Wilson. Really good year for 3rd round wide receivers. Shallow league ad, Rashi Rice, available in 64% of Yahoo leagues. Rashi Rice has had at least 5 targets in 3 of 4 games. He looks good. He just needs more snaps. But his competition ahead of him to get more snaps is not anything crazy. It's Justin Watson and MVS. He's also, Rashi Rice is better than Sky Moore. I think Rashi Rice, if he's available in your league, prioritize him. I want him in any league that he's available. Another guy I want in any league who's available is Marvin Mims. Marvin Mims just can't get the snaps. I don't get it. Right now, Marvin Mims leads Denver in receiving yards, but the snaps and routes have just kind of stayed the same. He ran only 12 routes, played 17 snaps in Denver's win over Chicago. He's talented, electric, and explosive, and I want to stash him on every one of my benches, but you can't play him right now because he's just not getting enough time. The dream scenario is Denver moves Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy, and Marvin Mims is on the field for 2/3 of the game. And I think he would be really, really good. And I think we could start him. Another shallow league ad. This guy might get dropped because Jameson Williams is coming back. That's the wrong move. Josh Reynolds. He is available in 61% of Yahoo leagues. He's had a strong start to the season, had 3 catches, 69 yards in week 4's win over Green Bay. He's had at least 6 targets and 65 yards receiving in every game played this season. Again, 6 targets, 65 yards every game played this season. He's a thing in Detroit. We saw the upside. He's had a 2-touchdown game, and he's, just a part of an offense we want to bet on. We talked about Miami. Detroit is not Miami, but Detroit is up there. And I think Detroit's going to get a little bit better with the addition of Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams makes my list as well. He's available in 68% of Yahoo leagues. NFL rule change brings Jameson Williams back a few weeks early. Was supposed to be here week 7. Now he's here week 5. He was a 12th overall pick in 2022. He's a burner. Obviously was a very productive player at Alabama. Major disappointment last season. He came off an injury and he played 6 uneventful games, caught only 1 ball, but it's his speed, it's his pedigree and potential opportunity where I want to stash him. This might never happen. He might just be a role player, and that's fine too. Not good for us. But I think he's going to help that entire Detroit offense with that speed. Another player who you should strongly considering adding, and a player who might get dropped is Josh Downs. Josh Downs had his quietest game of the season lows of 3 targets and 2 catches. But in every other game this year, he's had at least 5 targets, and he had a 12-target, 8-catch performance in Week 3's win over Baltimore. He ran nearly identical routes to Michael Pittman this week. And I think that he's going to bounce back this week big time against Tennessee. Another shallow league ad, Zay Jones, available in 69% of Yahoo leagues. He might have gotten cut this week. He's missed 2 weeks in a row, but he was not designated for the IR. So big play Zay could be back. Obviously, if anything were to happen to Christian Kirk or Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones would be a big thing. And even with those guys there, Zay Jones is still a guy that they like to target in the end zone. Another shallow league ad, Tyler Boyd. T. Higgins looks like he might miss some time with a rib injury. Tyler Boyd is available in 63% of Yahoo leagues. You know what Tyler Boyd is. Right now, he's probably a wide receiver 4 with wide receiver 3 upside, a veteran receiver who knows how to get it done. He has a capped ceiling, but he certainly would get targets any week that T. Higgins is not there. That offense is just not very good right now. Sad to say, Cincinnati's really struggling. I think Joe Burrow's on the bench pretty much everywhere I can bench him. I wouldn't be that excited to start Tyler Boyd, but again, with bye weeks coming up, having him is going to be useful. So add some Tyler Boyd where available. Trey Palmer, this is a fun one. We don't know what's going on with Mike Evans' hamstring. There is the bye week coming up this week, but I think Trey Palmer is going to be a very popular ad, especially in high stakes leagues. Palmer, a 6th-round pick, ran a 4.33 40. He's had 2 touchdown catches on the year already. Shout out to Cody Carpenter, formerly at Player Profiler, always talked about Trey Palmer's dog rating. Trey Palmer's got that dog in him. He's a physical player. He's got speed. He competes, and he has 2 touchdowns already. I think he'd see a big role increase if Mike Evans were to miss some time. Wan'Dale Robinson, depth piece. No, we don't want any Giants right now. He made this list before Monday Night Football, so I'm going to mention him. Giants need to figure some things out. I think that Wan'Dale Robinson, as he becomes healthier throughout the year, might be something useful. But I don't even want to talk about the Giants right now. They looked so bad last night on Monday Night Football. Depressing for a lot of people on Long Island where I live. Curtis Samuel, this is a fun one. Jahan Dotson caught a touchdown pass against Philly, but now Jahan Dotson's dealing with an ankle injury. Curtis Samuel had his best game of the season, 7 catches for 51 yards, and he scored a short rushing touchdown. I think Samuel is a wide receiver 4, and if Dotson misses, Samuel might be like a back end wide receiver 3. If Dotson's out, I'm going to look to try to play Curtis Samuel in a couple of flex spots because I think he could be really, really fun against that Chicago team. Chicago has a very soft defense. And with Curtis Samuel, you not only get the targets, he had 8 of them this past week, you also have the potential for rushing opportunities. This could be a fun one. Washington is coming off of 2 straight losses. If they have a chance to put it on Chicago, they're going to put it on Chicago, and that Chicago team is reeling. Alan Lazard, deep leaguers. Take a look at Lazard. Season high 61 receiving yards, and he scored a touchdown in New York's loss to Kansas City. Risky play in week 5, but if you're desperate for a bye week fill-in, Lazard has a very good matchup against Denver. Tight ends, my favorite tight end ad, Zach Ertz, number 1 waiver wire ad at tight end spot this week, makes my top 5 overall. He tied his season high with 10 targets, finished with 6 catches for 53 yards this week. This is a guy who's had 8 targets or more 3 times on the year. I talked about Josh Dobbs. I talked about the target tree with Hollywood Brown, Wilson, and Ertz. Prioritize Ertz if you need tight end help or if you need depth. He's available in 74% of Yahoo leagues. Shallow league ad, Luke Musgrave. I have to mention Luke Musgrave. Luke Musgrave had a head injury, kept him out of most of the game against Detroit. He should be back in week 5. They have the bye on week 6, which is a little bit, they have a bye coming up in week 6, but he should be back this week. He's got a longer time off. This is a guy coming off of a 6-catch, 8-target game, then unfortunately gets the head injury against Detroit. Shallow league ad to consider Gerald Everett, not because of his production. Gerald Everett had a quiet game this past week. He had 6 catches and 6 targets in week 3, did nothing in week 4, but Donald Parham has a wrist injury. If Donald Parham is to miss time, I think Everett's usage could go way up. If you recall, Donald Parham had 2 touchdown catches in week 3. So I think Everett could see a role increase just based on attrition and kind of take over most of the tight end targets and not have the kind of Donald Parham, thorn in his side for end zone targets and red zone usage. So I'm kind of sneaky into Gerald Everett if I'm really hurting at the tight end position. I don't want to talk about this one, guys, but he's available in 100% of Yahoo leagues. Jonnu Smith, he has 95 receiving yards in Sunday's loss to Jacksonville. He had 15 catches on 20 targets over the last 3 games played. Jonnu Smith, Arthur Smith reunion is going better than anybody thought. If Kyle Pitts does happen to be traded, then I do think we'd start getting excited about Jonnu Smith. But, I mean, let's be honest. He's much more productive than Kyle Pitts right now. He's more productive than Drake London in most of these games right now. Jonnu Smith, he had 15 catches on 20 targets. Obviously we're not playing him over Drake London. We're not really wanting to play Jonnu Smith at all. But Jonnu Smith is a thing right now. His game kind of meshes with the physical rushing attack that Atlanta's trying to use on a weekly basis. And he has the trust of his head coach. I hate talking about this one. I wish I was talking about Kyle Pitts smashing, and I wish I was talking about Drake London smashing and getting well targeted, but that is just not where we're at. Jonnu Smith has to be considered for tight end premium managers. Anytime a guy has a 95-yard receiving week at the tight end position and he's getting these sort of targets and this sort of consistency recently, you have to consider him in tight end premium. Speaking of tight end premium, Tyler Conklin has had at least 5 targets in each of the last 3 games. Sunday night, he finishes with a season-high 58 receiving yards. Nothing flashy, but it's the same as last year. We end up adding Tyler Conklin in tight end premium leagues. FFPC managers definitely try to roster Conklin. He's not going away. If you're a little bit more desperate at the tight end position, Logan Thomas returned from injury, led Washington tight ends. He's had at least 3 targets in every game played this year. Again, this is not an exciting one for most people to hear, but a lot of times in these tight end premium formats, every tight end is rostered. Logan Thomas probably get rostered this week. He's on the field a lot for Washington. If anything does happen with Dotson, that is another body off the field for Washington. Maybe a few more targets for Logan Thomas. Deep leaguers and tight end premium managers, Darnell Washington, massive rookie. This was a day 2 pick, third rounder out of Georgia. Played with Brock Bowers, this year's tight end 1. Shout out to all my Dynasty League viewers. But Darnell Washington is a mountain of a man. He is more of a blocker than anything, but he would see some work in the red zone, especially with his size and his athleticism. Pat Freiermuth is going to miss some time with a hamstring injury. I don't know how much time, but Darnell Washington becomes interesting as a red zone threat. Dynasty managers, go ahead and grab some Darnell Washington if he's out on your waiver wire, just to kind of see where this thing goes. I don't have that many high hopes for him. So again, this is like a 1% or 0% bid if your league allows it. My top 10 overall: CJ Stroud, Adam if he's available, Jaleel McLaughlin at the 2 spot, Michael Wilson at the 3 spot. So that's my quarterback, running back, and wide receiver 1. Chuba Hubbard, based on the fact that I think Miles Sanders is breaking down, is my number 4 waiver wire ad. Zach Ertz, number 5. Rashee Rice, number 6. Luke Musgrave, number 7. Tyjae Spears, number 8. Keaton Mitchell sneaks in at the number 9 spot. Grab some Keaton Mitchell. Let's see where this thing goes. And number 10, I'm looking for Josh Downs to have a big rebound week this week in a big division game against Tennessee. Stick with us here at Player Profiler. We're going to be dropping videos like this to help you all season long. Check out all of our podcasts. Check out all of our written content. If you like this video, you can also read my waiver wire column on playerprofiler.com. I also drop a sleepers video later in the week and a sleepers column on playerprofiler.com where I talk about some low percentage guys that you can dumpster dive and put in your lineup if you're desperate this week. And based on some of these injuries, there's going to be a lot of desperate fantasy managers out there. But all we want to do is we want to keep competing. We want to keep getting wins for our fantasy teams. And stick with us at Player Profiler. We've got you covered. We want to see you win a lot of money. We want to see you win a lot of league championships. And have a great rest of your week. Let's crush it.